What's up, guys? The Wannabe Racer back once again with part 2 of my chat with Andrew from Stac. Back in part 1, we talked about the Stac Zero VR Silent Smart Trainer, which you can go back and listen to if you haven't already. In this part, we talk about Stac's Virtual Wind Tunnel software, aerodynamic testing, and maybe some tips on how to get yourself more aero on your bike. Listen to the end for those. Once again, sit back, grab a snack, and enjoy this very informative talk on aerodynamics from a guy who knows what he is talking about.
Okay, yeah. This little talk there of aerodynamics is a pretty good segue into the virtual wind tunnel. Just the other thing you guys are doing. So I guess just kind of explanation of what exactly it is, how that all works, and
Yeah, so my actual background is in aerodynamics and fluid dynamics and heat transfer as well. So right now I'm finishing up in the long process of finishing up my PhD in heat transfer and fluid dynamics. The actual topic I'm studying is heat exchanger design for cars. A lot of the same principles apply, but it's a much different final application. But aerodynamics has always been something I've been extremely fascinated by, and it's naturally gone towards something that's directly applicable to me. So in this case, with cyclist aerodynamics, I always was interested in what makes people slower or faster. So around the same time that we started the trainer, we started looking at how or whether it was possible with existing equipment to find a practical way of measuring someone's aerodynamics. So there's always going to be these super high-end 3D scanning systems, but we wanted to find something that was practical. So we actually started looking at the Microsoft Kinect, which at the time maybe it was 2 or 3 years old, but it was still kind of a novel idea, and people were starting to hack them and come up with new applications for what can we use this sensor technology for. And it's a surprisingly good package for its price. It's an exceptionally good package for its price. And the sensor itself, ironically, I think so a company called PrimeSense, which was based in Israel, had developed it, and then Microsoft used it for the Kinect, and then Apple, of all companies, went and bought it. So I think there was some interest in using it in one of the iPhones. I don't know if it ever happened or if they're going to do it, but they own the company now. So anyway, the sensor technology ended up being very economical and providing the right level of abilities to do the 3D scans. And that ties into my background of computational fluid dynamics. It's mostly numerical work that I do for my research. So through my research, I've become quite familiar with a couple different computational fluid dynamics, or CFD codes. And one of them is actually very well suited for this kind of analysis that I do with the virtual wind tunnel. So we figured out through lots of trial and error and development how to perform a good scan of an athlete, capturing all the salient details and looking at what happens, or basically the aerodynamics of that athlete. And it started off fairly humble beginnings, where and some weird experiments I did in the meantime, where I was trying to capture someone by rotating them essentially on a pedestal and keeping the scanner in one place, but spinning the athlete. That was complicated, and as a result of the motion, the athletes, first of all, would get kind of dizzy, but it was also shaking them around a bit, so it was difficult to maintain a steady position while the scan was happening. So we played around with that for a little bit, and then it kind of got put on the back burner when the trainer started taking off. But recently we've gone back to it, and with the purchase of this company from Apple, there's another company, Structure, is the name of them, but they developed this really neat little compact package that replaced the Kinect, and it just straps onto the back of an iPad, and it's completely battery powered. So the scanner itself is completely self-contained, provides the right amount of cost and accuracy that we need, and we can now obtain these scans remotely. So we've got partners all over the world, and they can perform these scans quite easily and upload the data to us, and we'll do the processing and the aerodynamic analysis. One of the other really neat features that we've been working on developing lately is essentially working towards optimization. So we can manipulate the mesh to test out different, essentially different effects of bike fits or different equipment. So if you were to change your bike fit and say you lower your stem or wider elbows or narrower elbows or angle your arms upward or move your head position, we can now do all those manipulations digitally. So we actually start from one single scan, and we make all these manipulations and then perform the analysis and then provide the results to you. So it actually gives you a very good comparison of what would happen if I did all of these different things. Longer term, what we're working towards is something that's a full optimization where we can just throw it into the computer, for lack of a better term, and it will go through and perform this optimization where it finds what the best position would be for that specific athlete. This is still potentially a couple of years away, but it's something that we're working towards, and that's where I see the power of the computers really showing their strength. So if you go to a wind tunnel, you rely on the engineer who's there to provide insight into what might be lower drag, but with the computer, it can do all these manipulations and look for what guides it towards the optimum solution. So that's kind of what I guess I got talking off on a little tangent there about the optimization, but that's generally what the virtual wind tunnel does. Is it's a numerical analysis to provide all of the aerodynamic details that you would get from a wind tunnel, which can help you refine your position or figure out what kind of power output you need to hit your target speed, things like that. And we can perform all of those comparisons and calculations.
Okay. So basically you just go into a place, sitting on your bike for a few minutes while someone takes a scan of you. That's kind of the idea that's happening.
That's all there is to it. So the scan itself might take 3 or 4 minutes of actual scan time, and then the rest of it is as an athlete, you're done at that point. So you've done all the hard work, just holding your position for 3 or 4 minutes. Yep. And that's when it all gets sent to me, and I'll go through and do all the processing and the analysis. But that's really all there is to it. So it's very easy to have remote partners, meaning that a bike shop down the road can contact us and get set up basically, and they can start performing these scans and send the data to us, and it's basically like having a wind tunnel in the shop, I guess, for a metaphor of it. So we do have partners, I think, on pretty much all continents now, except Africa. We don't have anyone from Africa yet. So, but aside from that, we've got lots of different partners in different countries, tons of interest, and it's something that's really starting to pick up steam right now. So the hardest part for us was just gaining some kind of initial recognition and awareness of people. So you have to break that initial barrier with marketing, and then once you do hit that critical mass or the critical awareness, then we're at the point where we're not actively marketing it, but people are coming to us. And in fact, like, I got an email, I think just before our call, someone asking about 3D scanning. So it's to the point where we get multiple inquiries a week, and then we don't have to actively market now, which is a good position to be in. So we would like to continue offering this service in as many different locations and providing as many different athletes as we can with the means aerodynamic analysis, because wind tunnels just aren't practical for the average person. They're not cost effective.
Yeah, it definitely seems like there's been an increased interest in like do-it-yourself or while you ride kind of testing rather than going to a wind tunnel, especially with like Garmin's acquisition of Alpha Mantis and other companies working on like on-bike sensor kind of things. So I guess it fits right into there.
Yeah, it's I think people are, whether it's a good thing or bad thing, people are data obsessed. So the problem I see is people don't always know the best thing to do with the data, or they don't know the benefits or the problems that come with that. So using the on-bike sensors as an example, unless you have the proper processing, it could potentially lead to errant information or just send you in the wrong direction. But with the proper education, it can be a very powerful tool as well. So that's something. It is interesting to see that more and more people are interested in it. So whether you have an on-bike measurement or not, there's also the best bike split option, or other analysis like that. And I think Golden Cheetah might have something along those lines, or I might be mixing that up with something else. But you can basically take your weather conditions in a given ride and compare the data with subsequent rides to see what's more aerodynamic. And you can back out some of those parameters, but the more variables you have, the harder it is to get good data. So, and that is one of the huge challenges with being outdoors. And using Alpha Mantis as an example, so Andy, the guy who developed the main technology there, he was initially trying to develop something for outdoor usage, but he just wasn't able to get the reliability of it up there. So that's why they went to the velodrome. And it was actually, I believe it was with the Canadian Sports Institute in Milton that most of the initial development work went on, which is kind of cool because it was in our own backyard here. And this is a company that's now, been acquired by Garmin, but also is known around the world for their method of testing. So, so it's always nice to see Canadian innovation like that. But yeah, there's lots of interest in people, or from people, in all of these technologies, and it also is kind of borne out when you look at just the equipment that is for sale in cycling or in triathlon or time trialing. Everything is aero oriented, and the more, there's lots of money that can be spent on something that has claimed aerodynamic advantages. So wheels are a good example. You can get extremely expensive, but some of them can offer a pretty decent advantage as well.
Yeah, so I guess you guys are working with bike fitters to kind of help sift through that sort of data, get people the fastest as well as still in a good position. That's kind of the goal there, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and I'm always a huge advocate of something that's sustainable rather than something that's purely aerodynamic. So I always ask, when we're working with a new athlete, I'll always ask, what race distance are you doing, first of all, and also how comfortable are you in your current position, and how aggressive and how flexible are you, and basically how much latitude do we have for changes. Because if someone can't ride in that position longer term, then it just doesn't make sense. Like, yeah, it might be aerodynamic, but what's the point if it's not practical? So that's where it is important to have direct feedback from the athlete. But yeah, I do like to put a focus on that when I can.
So with the virtual testing, like how sort of like small details can you test? Like if someone wanted to test different overshoes, can the technology tell a difference between that, or is it like bigger just position or helmet kind of changes?
There are some smaller changes that can be detected. It's not. Yeah, the ones I like to focus on are the larger changes. So, as an example, in a wind tunnel, when you're doing subsequent runs, there's always going to be some uncertainties. So basically, doing one run to the next, even with exactly the same equipment, it will be difficult to test up or to test the difference between, like you said, the overshoes or shoe covers or things like shaving your legs. I've seen studies showing that, maybe that's starting to become a larger difference, but it is still difficult to repeatedly test that on a full-scale cyclist. Those kind of changes can be large when you're testing just a shoe in the wind tunnel, because you're now measuring the difference between, say, 30 grams of drag and 29 grams of drag. But if you're trying to measure the difference between 3,000 grams of drag and 2,999 grams of drag, that's extremely difficult to resolve that difference. So it kind of gets lost in the noise of a full-scale wind tunnel model. Same goes with the numerical model. So we have some of the same challenges where if you're making very small granular changes like that, it is a little bit difficult to resolve. Now, that being said, I believe that there's a psychological advantage. If you believe you are faster, if you believe you have an aerodynamic advantage, you may get that extra little bit of placebo effect, that extra push that will give you that advantage and make it true. But at the moment, I try to stay away from analysis on those kinds of things. Same goes for fabrics. So a tight-fitting jersey versus a loose-fitting jersey is something that we can definitely start to resolve. But when you're looking at the difference between fabric A and fabric B, where it's just like a surface texture, that's well beyond the capabilities of even high-resolution models with supercomputers. So that's something that becomes very difficult to pick up. So I try to stay more in the realm of what happens if you move your elbows or your arm angle or your helmet position, because those are differences that we can easily resolve and don't get lost so much in the statistical noise.
Okay. So I'm assuming you've looked at scans and images of plenty cyclists out there. Is there any quick little changes that most people can make that's gonna make them a bit faster?
So this is what everyone wants to know. It's a difficult question because aerodynamics are a system and it's very specific to the rider. So you might change one thing on one rider and it's beneficial, and then you go to the next rider and it's detrimental. So now, that being said, there are some general things like if you have, tight-fitting clothing, like I said before, will almost always be faster than loose-fitting clothing. Anything that's flapping in the wind is essentially waste energy. And you notice this if you look at those flags that people put on their cars. They're actually creating quite a lot of drag. So the jersey is a pretty obvious example. Helmets or head position, more specifically, if you tend to lower your head a little bit more and allow your helmet to blend in with your back, that will help quite a bit as well. So that's you want to provide the air with as smooth a path as possible. Looking at the surface, the upper surface of an aircraft wing, that's the same kind of thing, where you want to have smooth transitions wherever you can. You minimize any disruptions which can cause flow separations and additional drag. So with a cyclist, you want to do that. So the back, the curved area, kind of like the top of an aircraft wing, you want to keep smooth. You want to avoid any sharp edges. You want to keep the airflow happy, essentially. So it's there is a bit of tweaking that can go on, but generally speaking, if you focus on those things like keeping everything smooth and no abrupt transitions, that will be beneficial for most people. What I find interesting is when you look at a lot of Ironman events, people who are doing long rides, like, I understand that comfort is a huge priority in that case. But you see them on the aero bars and they're up so high that they might as well be riding a road bike, which they'd probably be a little bit more comfortable on anyway. So those kind of things, like, I know they're out there and they're trying hard, and I really appreciate what goes into it, but Sometimes you look at that and think, okay, you didn't need to go with a TT bike, and maybe you would have been better off on a normal bike. But those are just some general comments. But it is very difficult to come up with general catch-all.
Yeah.
You will be fast if you do this. I guess the one area I could comment on is hydration. So if you're and this is more TT focused than a road cyclist, but if you want to keep your water bottles on the down tube, that is almost always going to be higher drag than having them behind your seat. So I hate seeing down tube water bottles, even on like Ironman or other things. There are other options for where you can put them that are lower drag, and it just seems like a waste. But that's mostly the generalization I can make.
Now I'm trying to think if there's a UCI rule about those water bottles, or if you got to worry about the fashion of road cyclists that you're never going to be able to convince them to put bottle cages back there.
Well, I think road cycling is interesting because it goes from aerodynamics being almost entirely unimportant, to extremely critical, and it can make that transition very quickly. So when you're in a peloton, if you're in the middle, or even if you're 2 or 3 riders deep, essentially you could be a brick, right? And it wouldn't make too much of a difference. I think between 30 and 50% of your drag is cut by drafting. However, if you are that one guy leading or one woman leading out, then aerodynamics all of a sudden become crucial if you're trying to push the pace of the peloton, or if you're trying to catch a breakaway. So for that one person, aerodynamics are extremely important. And likewise, if you're in a break, especially if it's a 2 or 3 man break, then that needs to be a huge priority for you. So some of these riders just kind of shrug it off and say, oh, I only need to look at aerodynamics when I'm doing a time trial stage or something like that, where really the benefits would be much larger, I think, for at least the domestique level riders would be focusing on the guys who are doing most of the lead outs. They're the ones that should be aerodynamic and not necessarily the big names. So it's almost backwards in that respect. But road riders, if you carry your bottle on the down tube, it's not going to be a huge difference for the most part. And that's something I think that, I doubt you're going to see too much of a change on that. It's just very convenient to have down tube bottle holders. They work well. So they're just not the most aerodynamic.
Yeah, rolling in a big group, I don't think you're wanting to reach behind you to try to pull out a bottle or try to put one back even. Imagine dropping that one's going to take out the guy behind you. So. Yeah,
and I've had so my first 70.3 race was the Muskoka half Ironman, and it's pretty rough. And very shortly into the bike leg, I hit a big pothole and launched both of my bottles that I had behind my seat, and I think it bounced off someone else's bike who was nearby. So I apologized as I saw it fly off, but also all of my hydration plan went out the window for that bike leg.
Well, I guess before kind of wrapping up on anything, what's kind of like the future holding for you guys then?
Well, I hinted at one of the things that we're working on. We do have some other products. We'd like to grow at the Virtual Wind Tunnel. The trainer still has lots of room to grow as well, and we'd like to continue developing that and try and figure out, okay, what's the best way to address the needs of the market. Because we know that there are a lot of things that people hate about trainers. They're not basically you're giving up at this point because you can't ride outdoors anymore. And that's the way a lot of people look at them. Personally, I see it as a very focused training method, but a lot of people just hate them. And it's a necessary evil if you want to stay in shape over the winter. But that being said, I think there's some interesting ways that basically the trainer market can be approached, and some innovations there. So see if there's anything else we can think of that kind of addresses the needs that people have. We're looking at a few things that might also improve training methods. They're in the very early stages of development, so I can't really comment too much on it right now, but it's just a general technology improvement or training method improvement to make your own training more efficient. And we personally don't see ourselves as a trainer company. It's more a technology company. So the trainers are one product that we have, but we are focusing more on technological developments and not necessarily staying in the trainer space.
Okay. Yeah, this all sounds exciting for sure.
Yeah, it's a very busy time. It can be stressful, but it's also a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this very informative chat with Andrew from Stac. If you would like to see more interviews like this on the channel, make sure you give this video a thumbs up or leave a comment down below about what sort of topics you would like to hear more about. Make sure you subscribe to the Wannabe Racer YouTube channel to keep up with all the weekly videos. And once again, this is the Wannabe Racer, and remember to keep faking it until you make it.